Hey, oh, we're recording.
Yes.
So I'm happy that you joined our family peer TA call. And TJ, who is a family training coordinator, is going to talk about FPAs helping children experiencing trauma. So I am Christy Ingram. I am another training coordinator. Feel free to ask questions as we go or put them in the chat and I'll monitor that. And then there'll also be opportunities to ask questions too. So let me know if you need anything while TJ is presenting and I'll be happy to help. So I'll hand it over to you, TJ.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Before we start, please fill out the poll for us so we could get demographics and titles. And, just take a minute or two, just fill it out. It's only 2 questions. Please and thank you. If you do not see the poll because you just came in, please put in the chat whether you are an FPA credentialized or not. Please put in if you're FPA supervisor, if you're credentialed or not, and what part of the state you are in. Meaning, are you from Hudson County? Are you from, downstate, Long Island, centralized area, with the kind of the city? So I can help navigate that if you're not sure. And I'm just waiting for 2 more people to fill out the poll, and we can begin. Oh, one more. Just need
I
one
think the
more.
other two people came in after it was up.
Yeah, so those 2, please put in the chat where you're from. I'm just waiting for one other person to fill out the poll, and then we can begin. Or if you can't do it, just put it in the chat and I'll close the poll in a minute. 2 more people trying to fill out the poll.
You just came in, please just put your name, the area that you are providing services, and if you're a family peer advocate, family peer supervisor.
State employee or other.
Yes.
All right, without further ado, I'll close the polls. Please fill in the chat if you did not get a chance to, and we'll go from there. All right. So again, I would like to thank everybody for coming. Can everybody see my screen before we move on?
Good morning, everyone.
All right.
I
Good
mean,
morning.
we can see it, TJ.
All right. So here's your trigger warning. Some of us work with families who are experiencing trauma offhand. Some of us are still working through our own traumas. So this presentation is FPA supporting families experiencing childhood trauma. It includes discussion of traumatic experiences involving children and families. They're not too graphic, don't worry about it, but it might be a trigger for you if you have some unresolved stuff. So that's why I put this here. Some content may be emotionally distressing or triggering. Please take care of your well-being. Feel free to step away, turn off your camera anytime if needed, and ask for supports from your supervisor. If you need one of us, feel free to chat with us directly, and we can do our best to support you while we finish this presentation. So Childhood trauma is unfortunately common. It can have a long-lasting effects. As FPAs, we often work with families whose children have been exposed to traumatic events. Our role is vital in helping caregivers understand trauma and access supports. This presentation will explore how FPAs can help families heal and thrive. Remember, we're not clinicians. Our objective in this is not to take a role of a clinician, but if we are aware and it's been expressed to us that there's trauma, it's our duty to utilize our resources to provide to the family for next steps and support them along the way. So, just out the box, like to ask anyone who wants to come off and put in the chat, what is childhood trauma? Anybody? Sure, we have some idea what childhood trauma is. You all experienced some type of childhood trauma, some less extensive than others. Even the
Abuse,
surgery to child is go on.
abuse, neglect, traumatic experience, maybe a death,
Yes, those
something
all
they've
encompass.
seen.
Could be child trafficking.
Yep.
Mhm.
So there's so many variances. It also could be something as little as you had to have a surgery. That's a traumatic experience, Um, someone walking out of your life. It's another traumatic experience. Jamie, you have something? Just
Parents fighting.
all right. Well, thank you for your answers.
A situation at school that could be traumatic as well.
Exactly. There's so many levels, right? Because stress is common. There's so many, it's good and bad stress. And bad stress leads to, can, often triggered through traumatic experiences. In the chat, someone said, someone that's been hurt and neglected in their life, also fixed bad experiences and fighting in their life, mental and emotional scars. Thank you. So, understanding childhood trauma. Childhood trauma can result from abuse, neglect, loss of loved ones, witnessing violence, as originally said, or household instability. Moving around too much is a form of trauma. The adverse childhood experiences study shows how trauma increases the risk of mental and physical health issues. Children may have signs like aggression, withdrawal, nightmares, or developmental delays. Recognizing these signs helps FPAs guide families to the right supports. So I want to kind of give a little bit of my experience. So being in foster care, I was adopted at 16, but prior to that, my siblings and I were exposed to a lot of abuse, neglect, and starvation. Now, when I went to a new family who's trying to promote a healthier lifestyle and provide me with food, and then academics, my certain areas of academics were slowed down because I was still operating off fight or flight. Now, at this point in time, people want to think about mental health in this mindset, not even psychologists or psychiatrists. So what happened was I was labeled as a child who needed special needs and extra services, as opposed to recognizing that this child has been through about 15 years in the matter of 3 years of his life of trauma. And certain aspects that fight or flight doesn't get turned off right away. So other avenues in my development was based on the physicalities. Let me get stronger. Let me get faster, and then let me protect my mental from anyone trying to get in. But I was also on my P's and Q's from adults. Adults weren't a body I could trust, and thus it delayed my educational development for a number of years. So let's look at the impact on families. When a child experiences trauma, the entire family is affected, usually. Um, Parents may feel overwhelmed, blamed, or unsure how to help with a child. Siblings may act out or struggle with their own emotions. Trauma often leads to stress, disrupted relationships, and increased involvement with systems like CPS, schools, or mental health providers. So now that we have a basic understanding, let's look at what our role is as an FPA. FPAs support families through our own lived experience. So even we might not necessarily remember our childhood trauma, we do understand trauma. And just by that notion alone opens up a little bit of those doors where we share our lived experience to allow our families to build a connection. So our roles will include listening without judgment. We offer hope, and by that we show through our lived experience where we've come from and where we've been. We want to help families advocate for trauma-informed care and modeling how to navigate complex systems. So if we understand this, it should not automatically, but it should be in our mindset of what we should not do as FPAs. So as I started off with this, we do not diagnose. If the families come to us and tell us what is going on, it's not a diagnosis. We can understand trauma. But outside of the trauma, that's not adding anything extra. We do not make decisions for the families. We just offer solutions and resources. And in that, we develop the goals and steps that they're going to need to what's most important to reach those decisions on how they want to accept service. Again, we're not their friends, no matter how similar our circumstances are, or how connected we feel. Let's not cross those boundaries. We do not chauffeur. Now, a lot of this stuff is also contingent on your agency, what they are expecting you to do, rules and regulations and policies. If your job allows you to pick up and drop families off, that's completely different than you using your personalized vehicle and going above and beyond, or working on the weekends because they called and there's an emergency. We don't do that. We do not babysit. Yes, childcare is eminent and we need help with our children sometimes, but we cannot ask or expect to step in for a babysitter role. And then we do not work for the families. So in that meaning, we're not on their beck and call. We're not on their payroll. Thus, they cannot dictate how and what we do in our roles. However, they can tell us if we're hurting or helping them and what ways we can develop. But at the end of the day, we work for the agency to supply that support needed for families to thrive. So, question for the group here: why is it important for FPAs to be trauma informed? You could put in the chat or you could come off mute.
To be able to assist them and guide them in finding resources for them and their families to help them navigate and heal and move forward from the trauma.
Definitely. Thank you, Carrie. Take one or two more.
So we can be sensitive to the traumas that they've experienced as well as our own traumas.
Yeah. Yeah, this is Kristen. I was going to say, I think it's important to understand, as much as we go into the field to validate what these families are going through, it can also be very re-traumatizing for us, seeing some of the situations that we're in. So it's good to know that, again, these families are also probably going to validate our experience at the same time.
Exactly. I love those answers. Thank you, Kristen. In the chat, we have from pressers, so we know how to provide services correctly. Alexander says, so we can have more empathetic lens. And then Jamie said, to be able to meet the family where they are in their life. All great answers.
And to recognize our own trauma.
Definitely, too.
It may trigger us. Their trauma may trigger something that happened in our lives. So we have to really understand their trauma and be able to deal with it, our own triggers.
Exactly. Thank you. And the reason, and I'm glad you all brought that up for about looking at the FPA, you don't want to re-trigger yourself. But if it is, what are the things or resources or supports that you need if it happens? And how do we work those in so we can continuously do our job appropriately, effectively? So by understanding and being vigilant, we understand that behaviors, there's so many different behaviors that are linked to this. Body language is one of them. You can tell by people who might have been abused, they don't like touching very much. And they're also going to be more closed off to expressing anything that they went through that's traumatic. Memory. So as I was saying before, my memory was really bad when I was younger because my mind wasn't operating as a young person who needed the traditional care and outlets that a child would have. So my memory was based on these bad things happen. How do I look out for these, and how am I going to survive them when they come up again? So anything that did not seem important was trivial to me. It wasn't a part of my development. So these things are something we can look into. Emotions, sporadic emotions, temper tantrums, crying. These are all things to kind of look for, and it's in ourselves. We experience it, and sometimes we may not even pay attention. But if we did some work here and there for in therapy now, sometimes your therapist might tell you to do some homework and how to navigate and what does it feel like when this happens? Are you angry? Are you sad? Angry is usually what we see at the top, but the underlying things, if you look at it as an iceberg, there's so much underneath that those waves that we do not see. And then we're going to look at these relationships. Relationships could be either hard to make, not easy to keep, or we just isolate ourselves because we're afraid that they're going to hurt us in some way, shape, or form. And as I said, for me, as I'm sure some of you might, if you thought about it, if you experienced childhood trauma, learning, if it wasn't basics like reading and writing, maybe some science because I was into that, other areas of information or education seemed trivial to me because I had to worry about how I was going to protect myself. I was going to end up back in the system again, or someone's going to try and harm me. I didn't need to know A plus B equals C. What was I going to do for me right now? You know what I mean? And then lastly, the brain development. We're not clinicians, we're not neuro doctors. However, delays in your brain development, hormone regulation, displacement or too much dopamine and serotonin because of these. And then a lot of things that want to lead to the brain is that a lot of our traumas that build on certain emotions become addictions. So we might be addicted to being angry, addicted to being sad, and we don't even know why. But if your body keeps reproducing these hormones in these certain situations, it becomes a familiarity on why we're coming back to this, why things will occur and happen. And it's based upon trauma because we didn't work through them. Food for thought. So as we kind of went through in the last slide, signs of trauma responses. I'm not going to go through all of them, but they're either behavioral, emotional, physical, or psychological. You could take a quick picture if you wanted this. I thought it was interesting to just kind of look at because we have our own experiences and knowledge, but sometimes to have those specific bullets on these are very real. These things can happen, and these are all avenues that one can lead to understanding if someone's experiencing some type of trauma. So now that we kind of understand some traumas and what they look like, what are some of the key strategies for us FPAs when working with these families? So obviously a huge part of our role is developing trust as FPAs. And through our lived experience that we've been in before, it's usually the opening to developing some type of trust that this person is not just a degree, they did not just read a book, that they're here and they're sincere and they want to help and they're empathetic to my cause. So this starts with listening and validating the family's experience, as someone said earlier when we we're talking about this. If families feel that you're brushing it away or it's a cookie cutter approach, they're going to shut down. We offer tools like grounding techniques, behavior management tips, and ways to manage triggers. So once we have an understanding of what these triggers are, traumas, we can dive into either what has worked for us as options, not as end all be all. And if we don't have those, let's point them in the right direction to figure out how we're going to manage these. And that's whether it's through therapy, there's some trainings that we have based upon those, or just on how to regulate ourselves, how to be grounded. And one of those things that I tell families a lot of people don't do, if you can, if the weather's warm enough, go to a park. If you have a backyard, stand on the ground with your shoes off. Exchange that frequency and that energy with the earth, right? Be in the now. Take yourself away from who you think you are or who you believe you are to be, right? So sometimes coming back to that nothingness is most important because all the time we're like, I'm a parent. I have a learning disability. I have been abused. No, that's not who you are. These are what we either gained through trainings and education or experiences that got us to this point, but that's not who you are. And one thing I learned for myself is to try and take at least 5 minutes because it's hard and just try and sit as into nothing. Like, what does it mean to just be a conscious, sentient being experiencing this? Take yourself away from your titles and your roles and expectations. Most importantly, we can connect families with trauma-informed professional supports and peer networks. These are some of the most important avenues as FPAs for what we do, right? Because we can't fix it all, but we have some solutions and resources, things that worked for us and things that didn't. And it's building that trust again, that communication that allows them to know, excuse me, that we are actually really here for them. So this is a group discussion. You can come off, you just take a couple of minutes. You can answer one or both the questions. What trauma-related behaviors have you seen in families you've supported? Or what ways have you helped a family feel safe and heard? Just one or two examples. You can type in the chat or speak it out.
Family, a child has been adopted and wants to know who her maternal mother is, and with that, the mom who adopted her loved her, and she was her little princess, and she has this book, and she took on vacations, and as she got older and started acting out so much, the mother kind of like was no, not no hugs, no. So the child felt like neglected and rejected by her mom who adopted her. So that was a tough case for me, but she did graduate. We worked, together with the family, with communication and different things, and a team of us. And so the child graduated, and she's doing well now. And she and mom are spending more time together.
That's
And
awesome. I like that.
that,
I work with a family with their severe domestic violence. They have gone through. There's since been separation. All the children have PTSD. Mom is struggling with PTSD. Mom is prone to dysregulation frequently when she's speaking with me. And I found keeping my office very therapeutic. The lights dim, aromatherapy, nice sound machine with just soothing and helping her with tip skills. We do a lot of paced breathing or block breathing, just reminding her to breathe. She also responds well to physical contact, like just holding her hand and breathing with her and allowing her to have the experience and not expecting her to buck up or what have you. It's okay for you to feel these things and I want you to feel these things and we're just going to sit here and we're going to breathe together, and when you're ready to continue, you just let me know. This is your time, your space, just for you. And that frequently, well, every time we've had good experience, just allowing her wherever we are. We've been out in public together, navigating things, and she'll dysregulate. And I'll just reach over and hold her arm and just start to breathe. And she'll automatically kind of sync breathing with me and just compose because it's something, a habit, a practice we've already developed together to assist her in regulating. And now she's saying, I was able to self regulate. I was frustrated. And I just remembered to just breathe. So sometimes simple things like literally just breathing helps
Mm-hmm.
people. And if you could just teach them how to breathe.
Yeah, very true. There's an art of breathing. Most people don't know. There's your basic life skills breathing, what your body needs to do naturally. And there's ways to control your heart rate, control anxieties by simple breathing techniques and how to breathe. It goes the same for sports, and or you have to learn how to breathe outside of the norm. Thank you for sharing that, Carrie. That's awesome. In the chat, we have from Angelica, therapy and self care to help with dealing with families who are dealing with trauma. Tamara said, a runaway child helped the parent to connect and how to deal with a runaway child, given the resources they needed to support systems. Jamie said substance abuse, hyperactivity, help the family develop structure and routine, develop goals and encouragement. And then Kristen said afraid to trust or ask for or accept help in addiction. And I've had the most success by appropriately sharing my lived experience. It's amazing how generally our lived experiences and the tools we gather are the same things that we utilize continuously. Like this, it's never going to be is an old, outdated response to helping families. These are our most important tools that we will utilize. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. So, trauma informed principles. Trauma informed care isn't just a buzzword; it's a framework. The 6 principles ensure families feel safe and supported. FPAs embody these values by reliable, transparent, and being culturally sensitive. Empowering families to make their own choices is critical to their healing journey. So, what I like to say about this is when people or families talk to us, we don't give them our opinions in what you should do. We just give them the options that we see from what they presented to us, along with the resources. And at the end of the day, for family driven care, where we're supposed to be, these families will pick, they will drive, and we will check in and make sure that they're reaching the goals that they set out to and reevaluate if they haven't gotten there or it's too hard. We might have to start somewhere else. And again, the family will lead to that. So, the 6 principles. One is families have a primary decision making role in the care of children, so including the type of services and support they receive. Families are recognized as equal partners at all levels, from individual care planning to program development and system governance. And families have access to accurate, understandable, and complete information so they can make informed decisions. And that means when we're there, we break down the jargon if it's used at the table. And when we're working with them, we try and abstain from that jargon unless the family's already savvy in that lingo, meeting them where they are. Number 4 is families are supported in a way that builds on their strengths and respects their culture, language, and values. Families will come to us and tell us about what they're struggling with. It's our job to take that in, but also say, well, what have you done that was successful in your life? What were some positive outcomes when you were struggling in the past? And what did it look like when you got through it? If we could just take one, and that could be I graduated high school when this was all going down. This could be I finally got my driver's license. Let's build on these strengths when you thought you couldn't do it, or it was out of reach, or out of, you didn't have the money, but you did it. It's an accomplishment. Now look at these things when you were struggling, right? You were able to do it then. Now let's look at what's stopping you now. And we take that in and let's develop whatever they're saying as a tool to develop as a strength. We don't want to look at weaknesses as weaknesses. We want to look at them as additional obstacles that they're going to overcome. That these might be setbacks, these might be hurdles, but these are not weaknesses. You just haven't developed the strength to do it yet. Number 5, services are flexible, individualized, and community based. They're designed to meet unique needs of each family member. Again, no cookie cutter approaches. Yes, there might be similarities, stories might be similar. Everyone's developmental experience, community, culture makes it different. Thus, we approach it for each family as sees fit to them. Number 6, families and providers share responsibility for outcomes. It continues feedback to improve services, supports, and relationships. So not only are we checking in on our families, we're also asking them how we are doing. We are also doing some self-reflection to make sure that we're meeting the families where they are and make sure that we're continuously developing our skills and areas of development that we must develop. We'll be ready to develop those skills because we have the feedback from not just our supervisors, because we're checking in with our families. They're the ones who are talking. They're not talking to our supervisors. Our supervisors see our paperwork. They see our notes. And then maybe if we come with a complaint or issue in supervision, but our families, we want to take that in as best as we can, because each family is going to recognize well, if we're sincere or not, if we're strong in what we do, if we're empathetic and sincere, or we just try to reach numbers because our organization or boss says so. So let's continue to develop and take responsibility for how we approach and meet our families. So here's a scenario. So we have a family that's struggling after their child witnessed the news coverage of a school shooting. The child is now nervous and scared to go to school, and in this fear, their school could be the next target. So this is actually something that I've not me personally, but I know a child in this experience, and it's trauma doesn't necessarily have to be directed towards you. Just visualizing or hearing the wrong information, depending on who we are, can lead to these negative thoughts that you could be next, your school could be next. And now your child or this child is thinking about how they can have an escape plan if something is to go down. So our job as the FPA, regardless if it happens to this child or not, is to help the family process these feelings. We advocate for trauma counseling because, again, it doesn't matter if it's hands-on experience, it's still trauma. Because we also still have traumas that are unexplored, right? Some could be generational traumas that are hereditary. Some people have experiences of slavery trauma from the African American community, and they're never been a slave. But some things that fear dogs. It's one of those. You've never been bit by a dog in your life, but it's a possibility that it could happen. And now you see people dodging dogs and they walk down the street, no matter how big or small. So after we offer the trauma counseling and supported them at the school meetings, so we're going to go to these schools. We're going to advocate on the behalf of the family while they're there and speak on their behalf if they ask us to make sure that they feel heard and validated. And then over time, the child will begin therapy if they're not already in therapy. And the family join as a parent support group. Parents need those support groups because other families might be experiencing this. And then the outcome is the family is felt seen. They are heard, and they're empowered to take the next step in their recovery and their healing. And eventually, what the outcome is hopefully that the school shooting, if they hear about it, it's not going to traumatize them again. They've been through it. They know what steps they can or should take, and they know who they can talk to if they need to get this off their chest. Right? They won't feel ashamed. They won't feel like they're going to get bullied, and their parents will be hearing them and won't just tell them to be quiet, go away, you're overreacting. Everyone will be on the same page because now we have a better understanding on how to navigate and move forward. So how can an FPA work one-on-one with our families? And as we stated in the beginning, build trust through our lived experience. Let's share parts of our personal stories when appropriate to create authentic connections. And then we want to normalize feelings of fear, guilt, confusion that a caregiver may experience and even the youth. And then we want to model and encourage self-advocacy. Help families learn how to speak up during school meetings, case plannings, or clinical appointments. They know they are the experts in their family and their needs. And then we want to role play conversations or provide talking points before our difficult meetings. Because the objective is to have our families be able to speak up on their own. We just want to be there to support them and maybe pick up on things that they didn't hear or catch on, and we could debrief with them afterwards. But this is going to help them become better self-advocates. And then we're going to assist in navigating systems, explain the process and policies in child welfare, education, and mental health systems. And we want to help complete applications or paperwork and attend appointments as a support. They might need help in the beginning. We could comb over the work after they fill out an application and just guide them to filling out appropriately if they miss something. And if situations of not being able to read or poor legible handwriting, we can help guide them in the beginning process and let them know we will help you this time, but we need you to kind of take note. Let's make copies of some of these so they can see what they've done, how to fill this out. Next application or form they must fill out, they can have a rough draft. They'll take their time and be stronger and more vigilant in how they're going to go about advocating for themselves and their family. So we want to promote trauma-informed parenting strategies, sharing resources on trauma impacts and behaviors in development. Sometimes we just think the child is acting out or want to self-diagnose, oh, they have ODD, they're just doing the most. They could actually be experiencing trauma. We want to encourage approaches rooted in patience, consistency, and emotional safety. We just want to make our families feel safe and valued and heard. Offer emotional support and validations. We always listen without judgment and validate their struggles. I know you're going through this. This is very real, and I understand what you're going through. And we want to reassure the caregiver that healing is a journey for the child and the family. Destruction comes easy. Healing is hard. It is a process. That's why many say therapy doesn't work, or they feel like they can't do it because healing takes the longest time. But as long as we tell them how long it took us and other people that you're not the only one going through it, most families are going to be more likely to grab the bull by the horns and walk through each process appropriately. And when they hit that I completed it mark, you're going to see how resilient and how strong and how healthy they are from when we first started working with them. We want to link to culturally relevant resources. Let's ask about these cultures if we're not familiarized with them. We want to connect them to the families, connect the families to community supports that honor their cultural values and language. And then we want to help them feel seen and supported without shame or stigma. And then we're going to support the goal settings and empowerment. We help caregivers identify the short-term goals for themselves and their child, and eventually long-term goals, because we want to make sure that they have this under the belt. And then we're going to celebrate the small wins and remind them of their strengths. And that's going to be when we get to the bigger goals as well. As long as they're with us, for your support, and we will cheer them on so they can learn eventually how to be their own cheerleader. Because ultimately, it's what I tell everybody. You are your star player. You are your biggest fan, biggest cheerleader, and you have to take care of yourself. Because no one can do it better than you. You just might need help to see how to do that. But ultimately, it's your life. Which leads us to collaboration and self-care. Us as FPAs, we don't work alone. That's why I love meeting in TAs and having our cafes, because you're not alone in this, and we can share ideas, resources, things that are working, things that have not. We often collaborate with schools, caseworkers, and clinicians to support a child's healing, but supporting trauma-affected families can be emotionally heavy. FPAs must practice self-care, and through that, we're setting boundaries, utilizing supervision, and seeking our peer support is crucial to avoid burnout and secondary traumas. Meaning, at times we could take on somebody else's trauma. It doesn't, once again, like I said, we don't necessarily have to experience it, but if we're empathetic enough, we could take that on into ourselves. And now we're re-traumatized, but for a different reason. Please practice self-care. Please reach out to each other. I always emphasize you all sharing emails or numbers. We're all FPAs to some degree, or supervisors with credentialized FPAs, but it doesn't mean we don't need help. And it would just mean we have to look through another lens. If somebody has that available to us, it would keep us running optimally. And we also know there's one of my favorite sayings, tapping out. Quitting while you're ahead is not the same as quitting. Sometimes we might need to tap out. Like, listen, this isn't for me right now. I got to step away, change my scenery. And I can either come back to this with a fresh start, or if it's too hard for you, that's where supervision comes in. Or maybe another FPA might be more equipped to take this on than you are. And then next time around, you might have the skills and the know-how that if a similar situation arises, you could approach it appropriately with a healthy mind. So what is trauma-informed care? It's a framework that recognizes the widespread impact of trauma and understands potential paths for recovery. It shifts the questions from what's wrong with you to what happened to you. Words have meanings. How we dictate our communicate ourselves is going to impact on how our families respond to us. Core principles of trauma care, informed care, is safety, creating physical and emotional safety for children and families. We want to be trustworthy, have trustworthiness and transparency, being honest and clear to build the support about what services they're receiving, what they have experienced, and what does it look like going through the healing process. Let's be honest. Peer support, using lived experience as a bridge to healing, right? As long as it's appropriate when needed, we share it and show them we're here to support you. You're not alone. I went through this, and this is what it looked like for me, and this is what I see for you. Now, what does this look like? One of the questions I like to ask our families when was working with them is, all right, so you've experienced A, B, and C. Now, in an ideal world, what would it look like if you had none of these traumas, right? So it kind of gets them a chance to step out from being in a victim mind state to a person who's already healed or never experienced it. It might take some time, and it's something we could do on our own. And then from there, how do we set our goals? What are the strategies to obtain those? Now, some things we can't get rid of, like some of the, well, if I had no children, I wouldn't go through this. All right, we've been there. But what does it look like? You still have this child now without the trauma. What does communication look like? What does empathy look like? Right. So we start building on these questions and pulling this out of them because they need to speak this into existence now. It's not just about us, it's about them. We have collaboration and mutuality. Families are partners in decision making. Nothing about us without us. That should be in your mind when we're working with our families. And even when we take it back to our supervisors, our families must be at this table if we try to have any type of decision making on their treatment plan. You could take notes of it. Let's bring it back to the family so they're not in the dark about it. And then when we meet again, let's bring them to the table. Have them prepare notes, have them prepare the questions that they're needing, or to advocate on what they don't want, what's not working, or what their fears are. That way they're still at the table, they're still driving the treatment. So how can FPAs use trauma-informed care? Again, empowerment, voice and choice, supporting families in regaining control. First and foremost, a lot of us, our families will feel they have no control of what's going on, and that's not true. But that's what happens when the trauma is too much and they've been feeling alone for a long time. So cultural, historical, and gender responsiveness, honoring identity, history, and lived experience. Nothing is trivial when it comes to this. It all led them to this point and why they're seeking services. Approach families with empathy and avoid re-traumatization. So by having the family speak on what's going on, by providing these resources, we don't want to navigate too deeply into that trauma unless the family's ready, because the objective is for healing. And what does it look like for us? And that's one of those things we put up there in the beginning of this presentation. If you're sending them to receive a workshop, make sure they know this might be triggers. And I'm here to support you if you need to step away. So therefore, if they might feel something, they can feel unsettled, they can step away. They can voice to you what it is. And we can help guide them back to finding that equilibrium to allow them to continue on to gain control and that they're not alone. And they're the star player. They have this. So we also need to recognize signs of traumas and behaviors in communication, right? So that's recognizing our traumas. If we're able to recognize our traumas and behaviors, we can see it in others, or to a degree, like I said, because our experience might not be theirs. But if we could recognize it, it helps us do our work more effectively. We want to help families understand how traumas affect children and relationships. That means we might need to, if the trauma has been present, a child experienced A, B, and C, is have some information on how it develops or breaks down the mind, what behaviors look like, right? So family doesn't feel that the child is just acting out or that they are a bad parent. No, these are things, and this happens to adults too. Then we can bridge this gap of we all experience trauma, we all do hurt, and we all need to heal, and we all have strength. It brings it together, and the family no longer feels isolated. That's the direction we're going, and that they are more than capable to succeeding whatever traumas that led them here to begin with. And then we want to focus on strength and resilience, not their struggles. I have a hard time bringing up a family's struggles when I've been an FPA they bring it up as fine, but the objective is to see that and look at the strengths that they've overcome with other aspects. So then they can view these struggles as just another obstacle and that they will get through it. That's my objective. So whatever works for you, just remember let's not focus on the struggles. You hear what the struggle is, and we provide the resources to get them to that next point in time for healing and development. And then we use calming strategies and referrals when needed. Like Harry said, breathing exercises. Ask your family, may I put my hand on your shoulder? Because depending on the trauma, touching might be a no-no. Give them the power. Is it all right? Do you need me to do something? Is it all right if I hug you? And then if what we are doing it needs a bit more, talk to the family. So I have this agency, I have this person that is specialized in this. I'm not giving you over, but I believe you need a different outlook or a different tool that will help us manage and move forward for next steps. Again, allowing the family to drive, we're providing the resources, and we're not violating space, boundaries, etc. So, in our conclusion, supporting families through trauma requires empathy, patience, and consistency. As FPAs, we bring unique values through shared experience. We can't fix everything, we must know this, but we can walk alongside families as they find their way forward. And in supporting, your presence matters. No matter what we might think I'm not getting through, if that family's not even ready yet, you just being there, you just following up, you extending a helping hand, it matters. They might not be ready today, tomorrow, but eventually they will be. And it's going to be because of that one person or two persons who were empathetic, who shared a little bit of themselves to show them how hard it was, but I got here. And that they will take that straight up on into themselves. And they will reach out and want to better support themselves and their families at the end of the day. So this is kind of, we have some time, at least 20 minutes. I kind of want to have an open discussion and dialogue with who's participating here. Here's some questions we could go off of, or you could share with us with an experience, what helped you dealing with a family experiencing trauma, or possibly share some resources pertaining to specific traumas. If you have any, you could definitely put those in the chat if you have any. But what did you learn or connect with today? Anybody, everybody, come off, put it in the chat. And what will you take to work with you, to apply in your work? Did this presentation help you understand trauma? Go on, Carrie.
I will say, in sharing your own trauma, it's not necessary to get into the weeds of your trauma. You can share just enough to let them know that you understand and you can relate to the experiences that the family is having, because you also don't want to run the risk of triggering them with what you're sharing. So sometimes just I won't say a broad, but maybe a broader relaying of your personal experience, because again, you don't want to re-traumatize them by sharing your story, even if what you're sharing in that setting is appropriate. TMI can be a burden as well. So just something to also be mindful of.
Yeah, I like that. So you want to water down your lived experience to the point where I hear you, I understand you, I've been there, and I hear the resources or what, some steps I took to help me overcome. So that way we don't have to talk about who did what, how it made you feel, and what you look like. No, I've been in there. I've been in foster care. I was abused. It was a rough life, but through therapy, finding a proper foster family, they were able to cultivate a safe place for me to develop. And then I took it upon myself in my older years to experience therapy, participate in support groups, men's groups, to help develop me properly and show me that I'm not alone. See, there's nothing graphic about it, but it's to the point. I've been there, I understand it, and I took certain steps throughout my life from a youth to an adult to allow me to be in front of you today to show you that it's possible for you to climb up out of this. It's not defining who you are, You just might have needed a little extra help along the way.
I know for me, I like that you brought up that trauma can be something that we're not even aware of. And I know for me, like I work a lot with parents who have now, gotten clean or they're getting their children back. And they really have a hard time understanding that their child has been in survival mode with them when they were going through that addiction and going through that trauma in the household. And I have to explain to the parents a lot, just because you have now gotten your life together and you are going to therapy, this child has kind of been conditioned to act this way in order to remain safe. So it's important to kind of understand how this child got here. So I do a lot of that explaining to the parent, and they don't fully understand the trauma and how that has impacted the growth of their child.
Definitely. No, you're absolutely right. You remind me of something. So my aunt, she used to be a nonprofit CEO in Hawaii. Long story short, her son had needs, and they went through the systems together. But what was nice about one of these conferences we went to, instead of just sharing her lived experience, her son was ready to share his. And there's one thing that Auntie always clarified. There's my version in my experience when I was with you, what we went through. But then there's also yours. So there might be two sides of the story that led to the trauma that's at hand. So mom or dad's trauma can be completely different than what the child was experiencing. And therefore, when they were sharing their story, you saw not only comparisons, but the differences in how they affect each other. But the roads they both took wasn't very similar, but to get to some sort of equilibrium, some sort of forgiveness, but more importantly, strength and I can do. And that didn't define me who I am. Right. I'm not accepting the fact that say, you know, I wasn't vigilant or because of, my traumas that I was going through. It's just a part of my life that I had to work on so I could be a better parent. And then this person, I had to work on this part of my life so I could be a better son and then become a better parent to my children because of my experience. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's true. Because someday you don't even know. You don't even know what your child might be watching and how they interpret it, right? Because I've seen a lot of stuff from mine. I knew so much stuff when I was younger. And then when people heard me speak, like, how do you know this? I've experienced a lot. I was exposed to a lot. And I didn't even know that was traumatizing me till later on in life. So thank you for that one. I'm going to read some of the chats. We have um, trauma presents itself in many forms. So listening is your family is key. That was from Erica. From Kristen, we have the session was overall validating. I have several families that reflect on my own traumatic childhood and addiction together. Own child with a diagnosis practicing self care, reconnecting my body, breath, and making sure I attend therapy has been crucial for the past few months. And then Kristen said, "Thank you for sharing that. It's also so important to check in with ourselves and make sure we're taking care of ourselves." Yep. Today, Arleni, I hope I didn't kill it. I learned today the importance to recognize signs of trauma can often be mistaken for behavioral problems. Correct. Ruth said, my takeaway from today is something you said. You asked your clients, what would life look like if none of those experiences had happened? Yes. And Rita said, I learned today the consequences of trauma on child's emotional development. Yeah. And when we're looking at these things, everything we're doing for our families are pertaining to the outcome of the child. But the family, if the parents or the guardians are ready to heal, it's going to be harder to reach the child because there's another thing what children are doing. They're learning from watching, right? So I think what made it easier for my children to say, I got two of them in therapy right now, and they are, they started from my son started from around age 10, and my daughter, she started from around age 6. So they've both been in for almost a full year, and they like it. They look forward to it, and you know what? Now I think grandma's a psychologist. Their dad is also going to school to be a clinician, but I go to therapy. Mom goes to therapy, and we explain to them when they're having their meltdowns or experiences It's okay to have emotions. It's okay to feel this. It's what we do with these experiences. Meaning, if we act out violently to harm others and hurt others, that's when it's a problem, right? It's not a problem to feel sad. It's not a problem to feel angry. It's how we manage these things and what we do. Are we harming other people because we feel this way? Are we harming ourselves? Are we just acting out because we don't know what to do and we're reaching for help? So again, we'll sit down, breathing exercises. Tell me what's going on in your mind. Now, this is, me, I'm a little bit more logical, but I still be empathetic in my questioning and trying to get them to see where they are, who they are. And yes, their minds are still developing. So I try and use as much layman's as I can. But sometimes I come to a point like, I just spit it to you 5 different ways and you're still not getting it. So I need you to let's breathe. Let's try and take our mind away from this for a little bit. And then usually when we come back, so how are you feeling? Was it necessary for you? What did you think the outcome was going to be? Or what did you think the problem was when you were this upset? And if they continue to say, I don't know, they don't know. And it's one of those things. It's one of those traumas they just don't understand, or experiences they just don't know how to regulate. But by us being there and showing them, and even the perfect example yesterday, I had my two youngest ones with me. We were going shopping. I took them to the zoo, whatever. But then they started acting up at the store. No matter how much redirection I was giving, they eventually went back to the same nonsense. So I said, listen, your dad is burnt out. My energy levels are low. I need you to calm down because I don't want to show you my anger. I don't want to be angry at you. I'm just letting you know I'm frazzled right now and you're not helping. And surprisingly, the 3 and 7-year-old stopped. I mean, what do they know about that? But they stopped. I guess the rum part was, all right, dad's angry. He doesn't want to ground us. Let's chill out for a little bit. And I was really amazed that they actually were able to behave themselves. We got in the car and made it home without much incident. Obviously, their behavior picked back up when they got home because mommy's home. It's a new energy. We could mess around with my older siblings, but it's just one of those things being self aware again, bringing it to self care, being aware of what's going on, how to articulate that I need a moment or I need you to stop screaming. You're not hurt. You're not bleeding. What's going on? Hands off each other. you know, and it's just one of those takeaways when we're working with our families and how to recognize, well, we might be frazzled, we might be out of pocket at this time. And then if we do get there, take that moment, count to 10, whatever you need, and come back. I apologize for me acting this way. I should have been in better control. But this point got me here, and I will do better next time. And the reason why I do this is so my children will begin to think, just because I have these emotions doesn't mean my behavior is warranted in a negative light. But if I'm out of pocket, how do I go back and apologize and try and work on this moving forward? And these are planting seeds. I don't expect any child per se because their brain doesn't want to stop developing to 25 per se. Obviously, when they get a little more teen years, you expect a different behavior or understanding, but they're still growing, they're still learning. And the hardest part that I think families or parents forget is that, especially teenage years, puberty years, between the hormones, peers, expectations, so there's so much going on, and they're trying to find themselves, but none of this makes sense. The only thing that makes sense is their friends and their phone, right? And I need to eat, sleep, and maybe shower. But outside of that, any experiences, the up and down, the letdowns, they don't really get it yet, and they might act out irrationally. And it's our job is to help our family, our parents, our families to recognize these things alongside of what could be actually stemming the behavior and what best ways to navigate and to have a proper discussion. And it might take a few more tries, right? But it's meeting them where they are.
I love that. How you shared about your family and just being real, having real talk. Like dad is tired. I need y'all to help me out here. And that was one of the things with that same family, like having that conversation. Not dwelling on the past, but having the conversation right there in the present, like sharing how you feel, how you're feeling about mom, and then allowing mom and giving them that timer, like turn the hourglass up. Okay, it's your turn. You share and kind of having that real talk, being transparent. But I love that. Thank you. One of the things I take away is um, just just reaffirming, like listening and uplifting the family, right? Listening without judgment, and just offering those tools for grounding and techniques and stuff like that. And then um, providing the professional supports that they need. Um, so this was an excellent training. I'm sorry about the camera going in and out. I'm in the hospital with my mom.
Oh, no worries. Hope everything's okay with your mom. I'm glad
But
that
thank
some
you.
of that.
Just awesome training and all the everything that everyone shared. It's really helpful.
You are most welcome. Thank you for that. Anybody else? I saw in the chat how we cope with our emotions to continue to be productive in life. Yeah. Yeah, go on, Carrie.
Sorry. Um,
Oh,
I also found too that language matters. Um, Putting things, instead of identifying as a victim, that you were victimized.
Mhm.
I think changing the tense of things and giving a platform to have these things in the past, I believe give people permission to start to move forward. So they're not
amen.
sitting in it as I'm a victim. The
Mhm.
mindset of I've been victimized kind of
Yeah,
changes how you process things from my own personal experience. So I kind of introduce that into spaces where I feel it's appropriate, depending on where people are. If they're still in the situation and the goal is to begin to extract them from the situation, then yes, they are still victims. But once they've been extracted from that situation, they're now moving forward. I think it's beneficial, in my opinion, and again, I've had good results, to put it in its place. You're
mhm,
moving on from, we're healing from, this is a journey to, so you have been victimized. And it kind of gives them an opportunity to be like, oh, yeah, yeah. So words matter. And
mhm.
to your other point, when we were talking about putting things in terms that people understand, I like to do both. I like to introduce the proper language and then give the definition, or give the definition and then use the proper term, because as FPAs, as people become more independent in self advocacy and advocating for their children, they need to be able to identify these words when they're in the wild.
I agree.
um so I like to use these words, and then yeah, so they want to do a, which ba 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 ba, and give that definition, or they're going to do ba 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 ba, which is, and then give the word. So they begin to identify the appropriate terminology based on the settings that they're in, so when they are navigating these systems independently, it's not new things being thrown at them.
I agree, and I like that you said that. The piggyback, I love what Chrissy put in that chat. Meaning, if a family has a first language, and we can try and articulate and give them what's being done in their native language, can make all the world a difference. It just means we might have to pull out our phone, or it might mean we have to use the translation hotline if your organization provides it. Um, but then also, like Chrissy said, it's try and get them to understand. I like the both, layman's and then the professional terms, so they have both. They can begin to start hearing how people are going to talk to them. Not everybody will talk to you on your level, especially when you're dealing with professionals. You're dealing with doctors, and most likely they're not going to water it down. Or if they do, it still might not be adequate enough. But that's one of those things I tell families, take notes, ask those questions and see what they said. If you don't understand, bring it back to me. And that way we could dissect these words and what they mean. Words have meanings. Is something I talk to my children all the time. So if they say there's one thing when we're playing around, I let things slide, but if they're really trying to have real decent conversations, I would say, what are you trying to say? Because this is what you said, but that's not what that means. Because this word means this. And I use the Oxford Dictionary. I don't use the newer ones because I believe that's most set to. So we'll go in and we'll dissect it. This is what this means. This is what it looks like. And the reason why is because I don't want people thinking, one, you're a fool that you don't know what you're saying. And then two, it's going to just help you thrive and succeed in life so no one can get over on you. Because my biggest thing is you don't want people to get over you. So if you can't read, you can't write, you can't articulate properly, chances are you're going to lose out on a lot of stuff. And I don't want that for you. So I pass on what's important. And then, well, my wife, she's Spanish speaking. She translates in Spanish, so they get both. They understand what we're both trying to say, and that therefore they're double prepared for how to communicate what people are saying to them and how to navigate for the systems they need. Trust me, we prepare these little kids, and as because of my background, things that you would need to know. Most parents don't even think to educate you on. But I want to give you all the tools, all that. That's the same thing when I work with my family. I'll get all for why you're here. I'm going to give you as many tools as I can. If I can't, I will find them for you. But in that, let's learn what these words mean. Let's learn what these phrases are, so you're not left in the dark and just saying yes to something you really didn't want to say yes to, because that happens often. Chrissy, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just thinking, sort of to connect what you were saying, it's important for us to check in with families while we're talking about things and make sure that they understand what we're saying, to say acronyms instead of just using the letters, and make sure that they are connecting with what we're saying and how we're saying it, as we work with them and try to understand where they are and how we can support.
Amen. Anybody else? Or something you want to share? An experience that relates to what we're talking about and how it's helped you, or how your organization might have helped you, or what was missing. It's important to share. Before we move on. Yes, we're all getting ready for this weekend, right? So outside of those last questions, does anybody else have any questions or comments or concerns pertaining to helping families in difficult situations pertaining to trauma?
We all know, TJ, we can go back and forth on this. If anybody is not aware of EMDR and what EMDR is, I do recommend they read up on it. It is an invaluable source. It is a resource that I've used myself to help me process my childhood trauma and even adolescent trauma. Families I have referred to, EMDR families I have referred to, EMDR have had good results. And it really just helps with the processing of trauma and helps with the fight or flight that we are programmed to operate in, coming from backgrounds of trauma. So just wanted to share that because I'm realizing it's not a common resource that a lot of people know about. So as FPAs, I feel it's an important resource for us to know when we're working with families who have histories of trauma.
I just thrown some links to kind of look into for EMDR. Um, However, there's so many services, which is great for in New York State that it can offer it. And especially, I know a lot of the families I used to work with are Medicaid, and many organizations will take that. So services will be available, but it's something that's important to check in, and maybe even for ourselves. It's important for us to even talk to somebody once in a blue. I mean, I look at it like dating. You were going for maybe a few years, and then you stop because you're okay, and life goes on, and then you might want to come back and revisit and talk to somebody about where you are in your new life, because there's at least from my understanding, we change about every 7 years, right? So we're no longer that person we were 7 years ago. Why? Traumas, experiences, things along that nature. And there's one thing that I've been taught is we have to reintroduce us to ourselves again, so we don't get lost and make believe that we are who we are based on our degrees or titles or experience. Sometimes you need to come back to that self love. Hey, how's it going? How you feeling? Let's revisit what we've been through, and let's see what strengths it gave us and see could be a possible setback, and then how to avoid or work through an experience that might come up again. But if we take that time to sit down, I'm actually, I don't care to share this with you all. I not only am I in school for being a clinician specializing in trauma, but I'm in the works now working on with little TJ. That's who most of my trauma stem from. But also little TJ's experiences can prevent growth of who the adult TJ is now, because certain aspects are reflecting in my psyche that I'm not aware of, I haven't been aware of. And if I can address those and get through those, more chains fall off. And I call those chains for myself because I know they were holding me back. So I'm in that process now of healing, protecting, showing little TJ that we're no longer there. And, apologizing for not having the strength, even though it wasn't my fault, right? But sometimes no one gave, in this instance, little TJ, any type of care, a hugging and telling me it's not his fault, to the point that he believed it. So this is what I give to you all and try and practice and maybe work with our families on how to try and reintroduce us to ourselves, our true selves, not the ones that society bestowed upon us, not the ones that our job bestowed upon us or academia, just our raw, primal, primitive, God-given bodies, entities that we are here in this experience to learn and grow together. But sometimes we get lost and hurt along the way. And these things do happen, but it doesn't define us. You two need to have a great weekend. So here's some resources. Please take out your phones and screenshot them. These are great for us to utilize, pass on to our families or something we might need. Especially for the trauma. I love the form care. I used to do a lot of work with SAMHSA and stuff, but please take this with you, look it over, see what it looks like, especially if you're furthering your education along with counseling or being a clinician, or just want to be a stronger FPA and to be able to recognize and articulate the needs and wants of our families we work with, comb through them, pass it to them. It's a great resource. So here's our upcoming events. We have our Supervisor Cafe, and then we have our Lived Experience Cafe, May and November. We've been through that, but it's coming up. And our additional monthly TAs, which are coming up. So this will be here. And again, if you did not fill out the poll, please put in the chat, your name if you're a credentialized FPA, if you're not, if you're a supervisor, if you're a credentialized supervisor or you work through another organization like OMH, and what part of the New York State you are in. And I really appreciate it. We need it for our deliverables. I'll pass it over to Christy.
Thank you guys for joining us. And if you ever need, any support or have